Imagine the scene, a home that seemed perfect crumbling in a matter of hours. All because a mother, driven by instincts that only she understood, decided to expose a truth that would shake the foundations of a marriage. The story you will hear now is one that make you question how far it goes to loyalty and how far the ambition of those who should love. Good night, listeners. I am Andre Branco, and you are on the Family Secrets channel, where we unravel the plots that hide behind the closed doors. Today, I bring an account that will move your emotions, the plot of a daughter-in-law that planned divorce while smiling at her husband. Elena, 58, was one of those women that life taught to suspect. Not for malice, but from experience. She knew people as few, especially those who approached her only son, Dmitri. And there were not a few. After all, who would not want a high, successful man, with a salary of 20,000 riaris per month and half of a 3-bedroom apartment in the heart of the city? The other half, by the way, belonged to her, the result of the sale of the property he had inherited from his own mother. It was then that, 2 years ago, Dmitri came home with Svetlana. A girl with shy smile, calculated looks and too much questions about the family's financial life. Elena felt the danger on time. That forced modesty, that excessive interest in his son's routine, everything seemed rehearsed. Svetlana, after all, was just a manager in a small company, living in rent in a corner away from the city. But the marriage happened, too fast, as if she feared Dmitri changed her mind. And that's when the game started. In the first months, Svetlana embodied the perfect daughter-in-law, cooked, smiled, helped with tasks. But Elena watched. Via the stealthy glances in the apartment documents, the subtle questions about bank accounts, the way the young woman forgot to return her son's card. Dmitri, blind from love, worked non-stop to please her. Gomers, expensive dinners, and she accepted everything like a right, not a gesture of affection. Until the signs were obvious. Svetlana started to save on everything. He bought only the cheapest, complained of lack of money, even with the generous allowance that Dmitri gave him. But where was that money? There were no new clothes, no exits with friends, no luxuries. It was as if the money was gone in the air. Until, one day Elena listened unintentionally. Svetlana, finding herself alone, talked to the phone with a friend. And what she revealed frozen her mother-in-law's blood. Her daughter-in-law was gathering every penny, cutting expenses, planning the divorce. Not any divorce, a cold, calculated plain. I wanted to leave the house with enough money to rent a decent apartment without having to go back to a squeezed kitnet. And, as if that were not enough, he still dreamed of compensation for moral damages for having to live with his mother-in-law. Elena felt the world turn. His daughter-in-law, who ate at their table, slept under the same roof, was drawing a blow against her husband. But how to act? If he told Dmitri, he, in love, would call her jealous. If he shut, Svetlana would continue to bleed him financially, smiling as she sank the knife. The decision came on a Friday night. Dmitri arrived exhausted from work. Svetlana was in the company in an inventory. Mother and son, alone in the kitchen. Elena had no choice. "Son, we need to talk." Her voice trembled, but the words came firmly. "Your wife is cheating on you. Not with another man, but in a much worse way, she's using you." Dmitri looked up, incredulously. "What are you talking about?" Elena spared no details. He spoke of suspicious economies, the divorce plan, the lies. Each word was a blow. And as she spoke, she saw her son's face. That empty, dangerous look she knew from his adolescence. When Dmitri was like this, better not to be in the path. "Are you sure?" His voice was icy. "Absolute. It would not invent something like that without proof." He got up slowly. The watch on the wall marked the time to the storm. Svetlana would arrive in an hour. "Where does she keep this money?" "I have no idea. Maybe in an account, a safe." Dmitri left without saying anything else. Elena knew, the explosion was a matter of time. And she came. When Svetlana arrived, exhausted, the climate was already in war. The dinner was quiet. Then the two locked themselves in the room. First, murmurs. Then shouts. Dmitri required answers. Svetlana defended himself, attacked, called the mother-in-law. Something fell to the ground with a crash. A sharp scream. And then, silence. The next morning, the apartment looked like a minefield. Dmitri went out to work with the expression of those who would not forgive. Svetlana appeared with her eyes swollen, without saying a word. And Elena knew, that family would never be the same. But one thing was certain, the truth, as painful as it was, had surfaced. And now, no one could pretend nothing happened. The day went into a heavy silence, loaded with united tension. At night Dmitri returned home even more agitated than the day before. In a few hours, the mother's words had rooted in her mind as an absolute truth, and he was determined to act. Svetlana arrived at work around 7, dinner silent, watched the television and went to bed. Dmitri waited. He waited until the rhythm of his breathing became slow and deep, until the apartment plunged into the midfielder's stillness. Then, with cautious steps, he broke into the room and started to turn his things. He was looking for documents, cards, any trace of the alleged secret economies which, according to Elena, she accumulated at her expense. It was the rustle of a roll that woke it up. Svetlana blinked against the darkness, disoriented, until the light suddenly lit. What he saw then was recorded in his memory forever. Dmitri, standing by the bed, holding a bank card between his fingers. The triumph distorted his features. He had found what he was looking for. Svetlana's eyes burned with terror. Then his mother was right, he said, with a voice that didn't seem human. Gathering money for divorce. Stealing from the family budget. She tried to babble an explanation, but the words shuffled in her mouth, choked on sleep and panic. There was no time to invent a convincing lie. You'll give me everything now. Open your mouth and deliver, he shouted, brave the card like a gun. Svetlana jumped out of bed and locked in the bathroom. Dmitri's punches against the door echoed as shots. Get out. Show the extracts, show where you hid. He was beyond reason, consumed by a fury that left no room for logic. From the corridor, Elena watched the scene, paralyzed. He knew the situation had escaped any control, but his son heard no one anymore, not even himself. It was then that from the bathroom came the stuffy sounds of a call. Svetlana spoke to someone, the trembling voice, begging help. Dmitri's fists redoubled intensity. I'll break this door, he threatened. Minutes later, the intercom sounded. 2 police, with serious expressions, were at the entrance. The shock on Dmitri's face was instantaneous. His just indignation evaporated, replaced by a deaf panic. Svetlana left the bathroom with red eyes, but her stance firm. With surgical details, he reported to the police the incident, the threats, the attempted theft, the violence. He showed the bruise on his arm, inheritance of the previous night's scandal. Elena tried to intervene, explain how her daughter-in-law had deceived them for years, how she drained family money to plan her escape. But the police barely heard her. For them, only the concrete facts mattered: an uncontrolled man, a frightened woman, a broken door. Dmitri was warned by violence. The domestic and threats. A protocol was drawn up. The explanations of all were recorded, including that of Svetlana, who, still at the police station, wrote a police report by aggression. But the worst would come the next day. She fulfilled the promise made in that desperate connection of the bathroom. He contacted the Dmitri company's HR department and narrowly told every detail of his behavior. In the respectable IT company where he worked, the reputation was untouchable. Any involvement with the police, any historical stain, was sufficient reason for summary resignation, especially when it came to domestic violence, too explosive to ignore. On Monday morning, Dmitri was called for a conversation with the HR manager. Your letter of explanation served for nothing. The facts were irrefutable: the police protocol, the denunciation of the wife, witnesses. The company could not risk its image by keeping an employee with that curriculum. He was fired for just cause, with a note in his history that would pursue him as a shadow. Attempts to regain a place in the IT market bumped into closed doors. The bad recommendations spread like fire in straw. Meanwhile, Svetlana entered the divorce and demanded the division of goods. His lawyer, expert in cases such as that, articulated a relentless strategy: compensation for moral damages, reference to abuse, a generous slice of property. The process was dragged for 6 months. At that time Dmitry survived nozzles, poorly paid freelances, gaining 1/10 of what he received before. The foods decreed by the judge devoured half of his meager income. In the final agreement, Svetlana took a compensation of 2 million rubles on the part of the house, a value that technically did not belong to her, but that her lawyer was able to justify as indirect contribution at home. Dmitry, ruined, had nowhere to take that sum. Elena was forced to sell her part in the apartment to pay off the debt. Mother and son moved to a conjugate on the periphery, bought with the change of sale. A year after divorce, Dmitry worked as an IT technician in a small company, earning 30,000 rubles per month. His career in the multinational was history. No one wanted to hire a professional with a past of scandals and legal problems. Meanwhile, Svetlana had invested divorce money in her own business, a beauty salon in a noble neighborhood. He bought a 2-bedroom apartment, began to live comfortably. A year and a half later, he married a wealthy businessman who knew nothing about his past. Elena often caught reviving that conversation with her son. If I had silent, maybe Svetlana had never dared to take the final step. Perhaps he had been, for fear of losing everything, or divorced in silence, without dragging his family through the mud of courts and police stations. But Dmitry did not keep the mother's grudge. He knew she had acted with good intentions, trying to protect him from a calculating woman. The problem is that no one could predict as far as the coldness of Svetlana would go, nor how methodical his revenge would be. 3 years after the scandal, they were still tight in that dull cubicle. Dmitry could not recover his status. He worked in mediocre, poorly paid jobs, struggling to close the accounts at the end of the month. His love life was a desert. Women felt their discouragement, their insecurity, the weight of a broken man. Meanwhile, Svetlana prospered. His salon made a stable profit. The husband businessman banking trips, imported cars, a country house on the outskirts of Moscow. Sometimes Elena found her by chance at the supermarket, on the street. Svetlana greeted her with a polished smile, but her eyes shone with the triumphant brightness of those who won the war. At such times, Elena understood the cruel irony of fate. When trying to save the son of a wicked woman had eventually destroyed him. Svetlana not only took the money, destroyed her career, her reputation, her future. The truth, after all, had revealed itself more devastating than the lie. And justice? Well, justice was just an abstract concept, shaped by those who knew how to play better.